Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The UK suspends trade deal talks with Israel over their military expansion as Keir Starmer calls the level of suffering in Gaza utterly intolerable. Original Sin, the book accusing the Biden administration of a political cover-up, hits bookshelves today. And at least 58 bodies are discovered in a hospital in Tripoli after clashes and a fragile ceasefire in Libya. To our top story, and the UK has suspended free trade talks with Israel over their military expansion in Gaza, threatening further action. It comes as 60 people were killed in overnight strikes. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer previously released a joint statement with French President Emmanuel Macron and Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, calling for an end to Netanyahu's so-called egregious actions. Speaking in Parliament today, the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy sent a message to Israel.
I say now to the people of Israel, I want a strong friendship with you based on shared values, with flourishing ties between our people and societies. We are unwavering in our commitment to your security and to your future, to countering the very real threat from Iran, the scourge of terrorism and the evils of anti-Semitism. But the conduct of the war in Gaza is damaging our relationship with your government. And as the Prime Minister has said, if Israel pursues this military offensive, as it has threatened, failing to ensure the unhindered provision of aid, we will take further action in response.
Responding to that UK announcement, an Israeli spokesman said even prior to today's announcement, the free trade agreement negotiations were not being advanced at all by the current UK government. More than that, the agreement would serve the mutual benefit of both countries. If due to anti-Israel obsession and domestic political considerations, the British government is willing to harm the British economy, that is its own prerogative. We can now speak to former British MP and former chair of the UK Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, great to have you on the show this evening. Thank you so much for joining me. The UK is suspending trade talks with Israel and summoning the ambassador over the cruel aid blockade. Is this too little too late from the UK government?
It does seem very late indeed. I think there's a huge amount of patience that's been extended to Israel. After all, they were the ones that were originally attacked, that barbaric episode with the Hamas, so many killings, hostages still there as well. But ultimately, we're seeing that the military gains on the battlefield are not translating into any form of strategy to take the Gaza Strip, indeed resolving the Palestinian situation, forward at all. And I'm pleased that Britain, France and other countries have stepped forward. I believe that this is Israel taking advantage, perhaps, of America stepping back from its role as arbiters on the international stage, as custodians, if you like, of global order. Trump has taken less interest in standing up to aggression, wherever it might be, and certainly when it's come to Netanyahu. And I'm therefore pleased that other nations are working together to stand up, because what we're seeing has been wrong, completely wrong, in the devastation that has been taking place in the pursuit of Hamas. So this is the right call, but as you say, it's taken some time to get to.
So, Tobias, in your opinion, is America not putting enough pressure on Israel at the moment?
Not at all. I mean, it's the one country that Israel does listen to and can have an influence in the Middle East. But you've seen how Trump chose not even to visit Netanyahu chose not even to go to Israel on his Middle East tour. Indeed, his interest perhaps was more in signing commercial deals than looking at the geopolitical challenges that the Middle East faces. And what is happening in Gaza, the world is watching on, and it is coming to the point now where the word genocide is being associated with what's happening. That's a very strong word to use in relation to Israel. And I represented a big Jewish quarter in the UK. The Jewish people here in Britain are flabbergasted to see this being done by the Israel politicians. It's not what I don't think Israel wants to be seen to be doing. This is very much promoted by Netanyahu himself, facing his own internal difficulties. But the idea that somehow you're going to remove 2 million people, you're going to take over the Gaza Strip, it was never, ever part of Israel's long-term plan, and it's moved us so far away from a two-state solution. It's not surprising that Israel is losing the support of the international community.
So, Tobias, Israel has hit back, saying if due to anti-Israel obsession and domestic political considerations, the British government is willing to harm the British economy, that is its own prerogative. I think, personally, that's quite strongly worded. Do you think this is a step change in the relationship between the two allies who've supported each other for so long?
I think we need to make it clear that the relationship between Britain and Israel as countries remains as strong as ever. But when America gets it wrong, whether it be in Iraq or elsewhere, we as a close friend and ally are willing to speak out. And likewise with Israel as well. Israel's strategy in dealing with the challenges that Gaza poses is wrong. Where they're taking the Palestinian challenge is wrong. They're denying international help. They've sealed the border up, and we're seeing starvation and famine on a biblical scale. And this needs to be contested, and that's quite right what the international community is doing. Don't forget, it wasn't too long ago when they sealed the border up and denied those vehicles being able to get in, that aid started to be dropped by the international community. I've already called for that. I called for that last week, because it's intolerable. We cannot stand by. The international community, there is an international collective duty of care. We saw this after Rwanda, that when a population or grouping or community is under siege in this way, the world should not just watch from afar and do nothing.
So, Tobias, we know aid is slowly entering Gaza as allies, as we've been talking about, apply pressure on Israel, which is carrying out a deadly ground offensive, killing hundreds. Do you think the UK needs to go further and stop arms sales to Israel?
I think that would be the next step if we don't see change in Israel's approach. As I say, where is the strategy here that translates the military might, the success on the battlefield, into something long-term that firstly gets us to a ceasefire, gets talks around the table, and takes us to a place where we can have some form of stability, a technocratic government put in place to allow the advance of any form of peace. Now, it's interesting, Britain's own experience in Northern Ireland. I served there in the British Army against the IRA, which had no right or expectation to participate in the long-term governance either north or south of the border. The political wing did, and we're seeing in Syria, we're seeing an old Al-Qaeda affiliate now in charge of the country. And there needs to be an avenue that then allows the Palestinians, regardless of their connections, to be able to draw a line on what's happened in the past, for the Hamas to somehow to be disbanded, but for governance then to be taken forward in their own with their own ability to look after their own future. And at the moment, Israel is completely denying that at the same time, causing so much carnage to 2 million people.
Tobias, should the UK and Europe feel any form of responsibility for the bloodshed in Gaza as these arms sales still continue?
I can understand why people ask that question. You sell these weapon systems to Israel and indeed other countries to defend themselves. Don't forget that even since that carnage on the 7th of October, Hamas has fired rockets into Israel. They've been under constant siege. And if it's not been from Hamas, it's been from Hezbollah as well, and indeed the Houthis too. Israel is a democracy in a very, very difficult part of the world, and therefore it has the right to defend itself. What we should be doing is, as we've just been discussing, is to influence Israel to say this is not the right approach. This will not bring long-term stability, and you're alienating the very countries, particularly the Abrahamic Accord signatories, the Arab nations around Israel, that are actually keen to support any of the rebuilding, the reconstruction of Gaza when the guns finally fall silent.
And Tobias, we've also been chatting there, and I just wanted you to sort of clarify for me. Do you think Israel is becoming increasingly isolated by the US and allies due to the actions that it keeps on taking at the moment?
I think the answer to that is yes, but it needs to be caveated by its Netanyahu's government. It's not directed as Israel or the Israeli people. And we must bear that in mind. The response from the Israeli government against Britain, is very, very personal indeed, saying, oh, you want to damage your own economy, as you repeated to me. This is wanting to pursue stability in the Middle East with the support of the international community. And the fact that journalists can't even get into Gaza, the fact that the international community can't provide the help to support those people caught up with this. Again, the strategy that Israel is pursuing. Yes, they've defeated many of the Hamas leaders. They've taken out the top branch. But what's happening is that as the bombs fall, then more and more recruits are willing to sign up to support Hamas, to replace those absolutely killed, because it's an ideology. We saw that with Hezbollah. We see that with the Houthis as well. So this is the wrong approach to deal with an insurgency. We saw this in Afghanistan. This is what General Petraeus speaks about, of clear, hold, and build. You clear an area, you then hold it, and then you rebuild it. But just search and destroy and turn it into rubble is not the way somehow either to win over the hearts and minds or defeat the very enemy that you're pursuing.
And just a quick thought before I let you go, Tobias. Hamas, they have not released hostages. This is something that Israel, they want their hostages back. Do you think Hamas are going to relent now as this aid blockade continues?
No, I don't think so. This is, again, a wrong assumption that Israel or Netanyahu has made simply by putting pressure on Gaza as a whole, that Hamas will relinquish, will suddenly do what Israel demands. And it doesn't work that way. Hamas has little care, little responsibility for those individuals, the millions of them in Gaza. And that, I'm afraid, is a sadness that we're having to deal with.
Tobias Ellwood, former British MP and former chair of the UK Defence Select Committee. Thank you so much for your thoughts and insights this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We can now go live to Tel Aviv to speak to our correspondent, Trent Murray. Trent, thank you so much for joining me. So nearly 3/4 of Gaza is now covered by Israel's evacuation orders, which have been expanded significantly around Khan Yunis. What is the latest on Israel's ground offensive?
Well, Leigh-Ann, we are seeing the Israeli military operation continue to gain steam. According to their own statements, we've heard in the past few hours the Israeli Air Force say that they have targeted more than 100 sites across Gaza, including what they describe as Hamas command and control centres, as well as anti-tank missile positions. That does align somewhat with what we are hearing on the ground in Gaza from the Civil Defence Agency there, which is reporting a number of strikes in multiple locations, including in the north, in the central part of Gaza, but particularly around Khan Yunis, as you rightly mentioned. That is an area where we've seen big evacuation orders issued in recent days, warning of an unprecedented attack coming. Those are the Israeli words they use in their Arabic warning statements. And we're now seeing that play out. We are hearing that the latest numbers are 60 people have died up until now from midnight tonight. So that number will likely climb based on what we've seen before. And we're also hearing that health facilities in the Gaza Strip are struggling to treat a number of the injured as Operation Gideon's Chariots, as the Israeli describe it, continues at pace.
On the political front, Netanyahu issued a furious response to the UK, France and Canada after the countries issued a joint statement demanding Israel change course. What exactly has he said, Trent?
Yeah, he was quick out of the gates with this statement, and it was quite a tersely worded one. That statement originally from the Canadians, the Brits and the French said that the current humanitarian aid plan that Israel has implemented is wholly inadequate and that the level of suffering in Gaza was intolerable. Well, in response to that, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that by asking Israel to end a defensive war for its survival before Hamas terrorists on our border are destroyed, and by demanding a Palestinian state, leaders in London, Paris and Ottawa are offering a huge prize for the genocidal attack on Israel on October 7th, while inviting more such atrocities. I think, though, as we just heard there from Tobias Ellwood, that in a number of those capitals and other places, patience is starting to wear thin over the current state of play when it comes to the aid delivery plans. I mean, we've only heard of 5 trucks going into Gaza in the past 24 hours, mainly carrying baby formula to try and treat some of the children and infants there. And this comes after the Israeli military said that the UN and other charity NGOs, their warehouses now are effectively empty. So it does in many ways feel like a drop in the ocean. That is how the UN has described it, and that is why you're seeing more countries, I think, line up to just say that this is not the right approach, and they're calling for a much larger delivery of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip.
Trent Murray in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. President Trump has said the US has a red line on when he'll stop pushing for peace between Russia and Ukraine. He said there is a good chance of a solution, but added there were big egos involved. After a 2-hour phone call with President Putin, Trump told reporters this was a European situation. It should have remained a European situation. The US has agreed to pay $5 million to the family of Ashael Babbitt, who was shot and killed by a Capitol police officer during the 6th January riots. The officer involved has been cleared of any wrongdoing. Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger has said he is disappointed with that decision. A second man has been charged with arson offences relating to fires at properties linked to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Romanian national Stanislav Kopikok was arrested at Luton Airport and has appeared in court today. A Ukrainian national has already been charged, and a third man has been arrested and does remain in police custody. And a British man believes he's broken a world record after running the width of Australia in 35 days. William Googe made the 3,800-kilometre journey from Perth to Bondi Beach. He has also been raising money for cancer charities and said the challenge was the toughest thing he'd ever done. Now, an explosive new book focused on President Biden's physical and cognitive decline has been released today. Original Sin, written by journalists Jake Chapper and Alex Thompson, makes several allegations surrounding the former president's health and his administration's decision to keep them away from the American public. The book's publication comes days after President Biden announced he'd been diagnosed with prostate cancer. We can now speak to Professor Larry Sabato, founder and director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. A pleasure to have you on, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us. Original Sin has been released today. Have you had the chance to read it? And if so, what's your take on the book?
I've read an excerpt from it, and I had the opportunity several times to speak to one of the authors in the months when it was being written. So I have some sense of it, yes. What do I think of it? I think they're right that the original sin was that Joe Biden was in no shape to run for a second term. And it really is pretty outrageous that his staff and Biden himself, he cannot be forgiven for this, decided to run, even though he clearly said, I certainly interpreted it as a clear statement in 2020 that he was going to be a transitional president serving for one term. He was actually suggesting to Americans that he could serve as president of the United States until he's 86. And let me quickly add that I think President Trump is too old too. I want to elect presidents in their 50s and 60s, as Americans did for almost our entire history. Back to the book. The real question is, which specific aides and family members were most involved? And of course, that is discussed in the book. They should be held accountable for that because they turned the presidency back over to Donald Trump, which they all said for 4 years was the one thing they wanted to keep from doing.
So, Professor, it's really interesting what you said there, because you feel Donald Trump may be actually too old to be the president, but he's got a lot of energy and he has brought in a lot of executive orders and he's been on this big foreign tour to the Middle East. His ability compared to Joe Biden is not even close, don't you think?
Well, you're comparing Donald Trump, who is currently 78, will be 79 on June 14th, and will be older than Joe Biden was at the end of his presidency when Trump completes his term, and assumedly his presidency in 3.5 years. So what's Trump going to look like at that time? Go back to the tapes. Joe Biden was a very active president in that first year, did a great deal, really the first year and a half. He did a great deal. Then you could see the decline really setting in. It accelerated in late 2023. And the lying mainly took place in 2024, maybe end of 2023 and throughout 2024 until he finally accepted the fact that he couldn't be the nominee. But it was too late for the Democrats.
The two writers say there were two versions of the former president, one functioning and one non-functioning. The non-functioning version, they say, was hidden by Biden's inner circle. There are also allegations that Biden didn't know who his White House staffers were at some points. What do you make of this? And if people should be held accountable, what should happen?
Well, you're held accountable in American politics by not being asked to be involved in other campaigns or in public office. You're not appointed to anything once your party takes control again of Congress or the White House, whatever it may be. That's the punishment. You don't have any legal liability or punishment in courts for having done this. And for Biden, of course, he's been at the end of his political career, probably while he was serving as president. So I don't think there's any additional penalty for him. For the Democratic Party, if some of these people in Congress, in the cabinet, in the staff run for office in 2026 or 2028, I think some of them will, they're going to be examined and questioned intensively about this. And as such, they will have to account for what they said then and what they actually knew. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to separate it out completely, but it's a burden they have to bear. Now, look, I was told, this was in fairly early 2024, by a source that had met with Biden, that he was not fully in command. Let's put it that way. And I did ask one staffer. I don't work out of the White House. I live in Charlottesville, which is 3 hours from Washington, I'm happy to say. And I asked that staffer about it. And I was told much the same thing, that he has good days and bad days. Well, I'm in my 70s, and I already have good days and bad days. So I understand that part. But when you're president of the United States, you really shouldn't be having a lot of bad days, because it affects the world.
And when you were told this by the staffer, was it a shock to you? Because I think a lot of the American public were asking how well Biden was and how cognitively well he was.
Yes, well, again, as somebody who was not in the White House and didn't visit and didn't see President Biden up close, I had to depend on the interpretations of those who did. And now we learn that only a tiny group of staffers and family members really had much interaction with him. And even members of the cabinet and members of his staff didn't see him for long stretches. This is something that, and I'm not trying to criticize the press for this, because I think the criticism belongs to the White House staff and Biden himself. But we have to depend on the media to ask these questions. When presidents misstep in an address, okay, we all, in giving speeches, sometimes tumble over our words. But when there is a consistent problem, when a president is having a hard time walking from the White House to Marine One, to helicopter off, when he can barely get down the stairs of Air Force One, these are real signals, and they can't be explained away the way we did see under Biden. I think we all wish we'd asked more questions, but we didn't know who to ask it of and whether they would tell the truth.
Professor, yesterday on W News, I spoke to Dr. Stephen Quay, a cancer specialist, who said there was no way Biden wasn't aware of this cancer diagnosis and would have known for some time. There are allegations there was a cover-up. What are your thoughts?
Well, to the great distress of my late mother, I did not become a real doctor, just a PhD. So I'm going to leave that to the real doctors. I don't know how long one knows about prostate cancer until there's a public disclosure of it, or until you have to go to the doctor for the side effects. The experts in that field will have to talk about that. I do think there are a lot of people on Twitter or X and some of these other social media sites who have absolutely no training whatsoever in medical science, and yet are expressing themselves fully as experts in that field. And I would just caution people to always be wary of experts in everything.
Professor, I just wanted to ask you, did the American public have a right to know what was going on behind the scenes with Biden's health? Because they were going to vote for him. He is the president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world.
No, the answer is definitely yes. Look, I've written a good deal about other presidents and what they hid, not just health problems, but scandals of various sorts. And the public does have a right to know. It's always a problem with discovering it. John F. Kennedy, who was a pretty good president, in my view, for the short time that he served, had terrible medical problems, and they were dismissed because he was young and vigorous and tanned. But it turned out that they probably affected his behavior and his performance in office. We should have known that. And there are a lot of other examples. Ronald Reagan, who was in the throes of the early stages of dementia in the last year and a half or 2 years of his term. That's another case of where it was kind of covered up and people didn't ask the right questions. So we have a history of this, and we never seem to learn.
Professor Larry Sabato, founder and director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. Thank you so much for your insights. I appreciate your time this evening.
I enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. A ceasefire agreement in Libya remains fragile after at least 58 unidentified corpses were discovered in a hospital in Tripoli on Monday. The Interior Ministry confirmed the bodies were found in the Abu Salim Accidents Hospital, which was under militia control. The leader of the stabilisation support apparatus who controlled the southern district of Abu Salim was killed last week. The corpses found on Monday are the second set of unidentified remains discovered in recent days. I'm now joined by Mohammed Sallak, former spokesperson of the Presidential Council. A pleasure to have you on, Mohammed. Thank you for joining us. The government announced a ceasefire almost 1 week ago following the killing of a major militia chief, which sparked deadly clashes in Tripoli. Is this ceasefire at risk of falling apart after the discovery of the bodies?
Thank you for having me. I think what we are seeing now in Tripoli is not an isolated incident. It's a direct result of uncontrolled weapons, corruption, political division, unseriousness from the international community. So it's a combination of elements that had led us to the current situation. So we have to look at the big picture. This is a direct result of all what we have been suffering from in recent years, from militia, from political division, along with institutional division. This is the current situation now in Libya. It's a complete mess.
You say Libya is a complete mess. The Prime Minister says eliminating militias is an ongoing project. Is the government committed to protecting civilians and cooperating with the International Criminal Court during this project?
Well, I'm surprised, actually, because a few weeks before, they were alive. They were friends. It was like a marriage of convenience between both. So now he's claiming Gnewa is a criminal. I mean, this is so strange for me. And that's exactly what we are facing. Militia are using their influence to secure financial and political gain, while the government rely on them to maintain power. It's a win-win situation, or we can call it a classic win-win dynamic between both. This won't do any good for Libya. What we need is a lasting solution, and lasting solution requires a comprehensive settlement, includes all key Libyan stakeholders. This means addressing not only power sharing arrangements, but also to address the root of conflicts, such as militia control, economic mismanagement, lack of institutional legitimacy. This should be done. Not what we are hearing from Prime Minister. Even Prime Minister didn't hear the voice of people in the streets. Maybe they wasn't loud enough. I don't know. So I don't think that any solutions will come from this government. We need a comprehensive settlement to save our country, to bring stability, sustainable solution.
So Donald Trump's advisor, Mossad Boulas, has been in Egypt reviewing the latest developments in Libya and efforts to restore calm. How can these countries help Libya right now? You said a comprehensive solution is needed.
Well, that's the issue. The international community again. The international community actually is divided, hesitated towards the solution in Libya. There is no will, actually. Of course, statements calling for de-escalation, stability and peace are welcome, but actions are needed. And we don't see actions, actually. It's just statements. They helped us to get rid of despotic regime, dictator, and left us with a complete mess with dozens of dictators. That's what we are facing now in Libya. So I think international community and the United States especially should overcome statements and do some serious actions, some serious steps. They have the tools to put pressure on the parties of conflict in Libya. They have to be more clear, stop the doublespeak and be more clear, take a clear position regarding the situation in Libya. If they are looking for a stable country in that strategic location.
Mohammed, the Trump administration is working on a plan to move 1 million Palestinians to Libya. Are you preparing to take in Palestinians in exchange for billions of dollars of funds that the US froze more than a decade ago? You said Libya is a mess, it needs economic help. Is this how you can achieve it?
No, absolutely no. We refuse this. This is unacceptable at all. Not only me, but the rest of Libyans. We don't need this, and we couldn't handle this. And I think that if unity governments agreed with the Trump administration about this, it will be a disaster. Actually, it's a big disaster. That's the last thing we need in Libya. We already have problems with security and militia and economic problems. Why we receive 1 million Palestinians? Well, this is actually this is crazy, and I don't think that will be acceptable by all means.
Mohammed Sallak, former spokesperson of the Presidential Council. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Taiwan's president has reiterated a call for peace and dialogue with China as he marks 1 year in office. But William Lee-Ching-de also said the island must strengthen its military capabilities amid growing pressure from Beijing. Yena Lee reports from Beijing.
A year since William Lee-Ching-de was elected president of Taiwan, the island is facing turbulent times. Its biggest challenge, an increasingly assertive China. Taiwan's relationship with it was the key focus of his address, marking this milestone.
Taiwan loves peace. Taiwan society believes in the goodness of people. I too am committed to peace, because peace is priceless and war has no winners. But when it comes to seeking peace, we cannot have dreams nor illusions.
In recent years, China's raised military activity around Taiwan and its population of 25 million people. But it's been ramped up even further since Lai took office. Chinese fighter jets crossing an unofficial boundary separating the two sides have doubled compared to the same period a year ago. China's also carried out at least 7 sets of war games near the island in the last 12 months, the most ever seen, according to Taiwan's defense ministry.
Beijing sees Taiwan as an integral part of its territory and doesn't rule out taking it by force. It refers to Lai as a separatist and frequently calls him a troublemaker. Since he took office a year ago, China has also ramped up military activity near Taiwan.
To counter the China threat, Lai's pledged to strengthen Taiwan's defense. His government is pushing to increase military spending to over 3% of GDP and has called up more reservists for training. Lai says the best way to avoid war is to prepare for it. China accuses him of provoking it and blames him for escalating cross-strait tensions. Many people in China feel the differences between the two sides will be difficult to resolve.
A lot of historical problems can't be solved in a single generation. I think everyone should take it slowly.
In a sign of China's efforts to shut Taiwan out of the international community, World Health Organization member states on Monday rejected a proposal to invite the island to its annual assembly. Beijing strongly opposed its participation and called it an open challenge to the authority of the United Nations.
This year's decision sends a strong signal. Upholding the One China principle reflects the will of the people and the trend of the times. It is a powerful rebuttal of the Taiwan authorities and the political manipulation by a few countries.
Increasingly, Taiwan is finding it harder to rely on its most important ally, the United States. Taipei was caught off guard last month when US President Donald Trump announced 32% tariffs on Taiwanese imports, despite a $100 billion pledge to invest in US manufacturing by the island's semiconductor giant, TSMC. Washington is bound by treaty to defend the island in the event of an attack, but that's facing questions under Trump's transactional approach. Yena Lee, Al Arabiya, Beijing.
A reminder of our top stories. The UK suspends trade deal talks with Israel over their military expansion as Keir Starmer calls the level of suffering in Gaza utterly intolerable. Original Sin, the book accusing the Biden administration of a political cover-up, hits the bookshelves today. And at least 58 bodies are discovered in a hospital in Tripoli after clashes and a fragile ceasefire in Libya. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora is coming up next. Plus, we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for joining us.